Buckle up. This is the story of how I, Ruth, turned the tables on the people who thought they could write me out of their lives. It wasn't easy, but trust me, the satisfaction was worth every single second. You're an embarrassment. Don't come home. That's what my dad, a white man named Richard, snarled into the phone. His words hit me like a punch to the gut, stealing my breath and sending a shiver down my spine. It was the day before my mom's birthday. But at the party, everything changed when my sister's boyfriend looked at me, eyes wide with a mix of shock and maybe a little fear, and said, "Hi, boss." The room went silent. Masks slipped. And my carefully crafted plan for revenge was about to unfold. Let's rewind a bit so you understand why those words from my dad were like pouring gasoline on a slow-burning fire. I grew up in a house filled with tension, a constant tug-of-war between two worlds that never quite meshed. My mom, bless her heart, is Black. She's the kindest, most loving woman you'll ever meet, a true earth angel. My dad, on the other hand, well, he's a piece of work. He always saw me as a problem, a constant reminder of something he couldn't quite control. He never said it outright, but it was always there, simmering beneath the surface. The subtle digs, the dismissive tones, the way he always seemed to compare me unfavorably to my sister, Emily, who looked just like him. Emily had his blonde hair and blue eyes, and in his eyes she could truly do no wrong. I remember countless family dinners where I felt like an outsider looking in. They would speak about things I wasn't a part of. It was like they were speaking a different language. Anything I did that remotely leaned into my blackness was seen as ghetto or uncouth, but whatever Emily did was cute. Growing up, I poured my energy into school. I aced every test, devoured every book, and eventually won a scholarship to a top-tier university far away from our small, suffocating town. For the first time I felt free. I could be myself, surround myself with people who understood me, who didn't see me as other. I flourished, and eventually when I was done with school I built a successful tech company. But even with the distance, my dad's negativity always found a way to creep in. He'd call, feigning interest in my life, but the underlying message was always the same. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't white enough. I wasn't Emily. So, imagine my surprise when, a few years ago, my sister started dating a guy named Jake. He seemed nice enough, polite, well-dressed, and seemingly head over heels for Emily. He fit perfectly into their picture-perfect world. I met him a few times around the holidays and we exchanged pleasantries, but that was about it. I live across the country at this point. He seemed as bland as white bread, to be honest. Then came the phone call. Mom's birthday was coming up and I wanted to surprise her. I booked a flight, bought a thoughtful gift, and was genuinely excited to see her. That's when my dad dropped the bomb. "You're an embarrassment. Don't come home." His reasoning? He didn't want me making a scene at the party. He was ashamed of me, of who I was. The audacity. The pain cut deep, reopening old wounds I thought had finally healed. My mom, of course, was devastated. She begged me to come, but I knew it would only cause more conflict. I felt utterly defeated. But then something shifted inside me. The hurt morphed into anger, the anger into resolve. I decided right then and there that I was done playing the victim. I was done letting my dad dictate my worth. I was going to take control, and I was going to make him regret ever uttering those hateful words. The first step. I decided to do some digging into my sister's perfect boyfriend. I used my resources, my connections. It didn't take long to uncover a few interesting tidbits. And what I found was about to change everything. It turned out that Jake wasn't just a nice, bland guy. He was also deeply in debt. He had a gambling problem and a string of unpaid bills. He was desperate for money and he was willing to do anything to get it. And here's the kicker, he worked for me. That's right. Jake was a low-level manager at one of my company's regional offices. He had applied for the job under a different name and I didn't see him face to face at first. He was also using a fake degree and resume. I immediately knew what he was up to. He had to know that Emily's family was wealthy. My dad, despite his prejudice, had built a successful business. Jake was after their money, plain and simple. A plan began to formulate in my mind. It was risky, audacious, and potentially explosive, but it was also the perfect way to get my revenge and protect my mom and sister from this leech. He was trying to pull the wool over their eyes. I was going to use his greed against him and reveal his true self to everyone. I decided to go to the party after all. I knew my dad wouldn't be happy, but I didn't care anymore. This was about more than just a birthday. It was about standing up for myself, for my mom, and for finally putting an end to my dad's hateful behavior. So I called my mom and I told her I was coming. I could hear the relief in her voice, the joy that washed over her. That was all the motivation I needed. I booked the next flight and I prepared myself for what was to come. I was going to crash that party and I was going to bring the house down. The day of the party was a blur of nervous energy and meticulous planning. I arrived a few hours early to help my mom with the final preparations. Seeing her face light up when I walked through the door made it all worthwhile. I helped her in the kitchen, listened to her stories, and tried to ignore the knot of anxiety that was tightening in my stomach. When my dad arrived home, the atmosphere shifted instantly. He glared at me, his face flushed with anger. "What are you doing here?" he spat, his voice dripping with disdain. "I'm here for Mom," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "It's her birthday. I told you not to come. You're going to ruin everything." "I'm not going anywhere," I said, meeting his gaze head-on. "I'm here to celebrate my mother, and nothing you say or do is going to change that." He stormed off, muttering under his breath, leaving me to wonder if I had made a mistake. Maybe I should have just stayed away. Maybe I was just making things worse. But I pushed those doubts aside. I had come this far and I wasn't going to back down now. I focused on my mom, on making her day special. As guests started to arrive, I plastered a smile on my face and tried to blend in. Then Jake arrived with Emily. He was all smiles and charm, playing the part of the doting boyfriend perfectly. He greeted my parents, showered Emily with compliments, and made small talk with the other guests. He even tried to engage with me, offering a polite, "Nice to see you again, Ruth." "You too, Jake," I replied, my voice dangerously sweet. "It's been a while." As the party went on, I watched Jake closely, studying his every move. He was smooth, calculating, and clearly determined to impress everyone. He ingratiated himself with my dad, laughing at his jokes and agreeing with his opinions. It made my skin crawl. I knew I had to act soon. The longer I waited, the more entrenched he would become in their lives. But I also knew that I had to choose my moment carefully. I needed to make sure that my actions would have the maximum impact, that they would expose Jake for the fraud that he was. I confided in my mom and she was all for it. She told me her suspicions about him as well. She was ready to see him gone. As the sun began to set and the party reached its peak, I knew that the time had come. It was now or never. I took a deep breath, steeled my nerves, and prepared to unleash my carefully planned revenge. The air was thick with anticipation. Something big was about to happen. The room was buzzing with conversation, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. My dad was holding court in the corner, regaling a group of guests with one of his long-winded stories. Emily was by his side, beaming with pride. Jake was standing next to her, his arm draped possessively around her waist. I took a deep breath and walked towards them, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel all eyes on me, sensing that something was about to happen. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "I have an announcement to make." Everyone turned to look at me, their faces etched with curiosity. My dad's face was a mask of annoyance. "What is it, Ruth?" he snapped. "Can't you see we're busy?" "This won't take long," I replied, my gaze fixed on Jake. "It concerns your future son-in-law." Jake's smile faltered, a flicker of unease in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" he stammered. "I'm talking about the fact that Jake here isn't who he says he is," I said, my voice ringing with conviction. "He's a liar, a fraud, and a con artist." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Emily's face paled. My dad looked like he was about to explode. "What is the meaning of this?" he roared. "Are you trying to humiliate us?" "I'm trying to protect you," I said, turning to my sister. "Jake is using you, Emily. He's after your money." "That's not true," Jake protested, his voice rising in desperation. "Ruth is lying. She's always been jealous of me and Emily." "Is that so?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "Then how do you explain the fact that you work for me, Jake? Or should I say Mr. Jake's fake last name?" The room went silent. Jake's face drained of all color. Everyone was staring at him, waiting for his explanation. "What are you talking about?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm talking about the fact that Jake is a low-level manager at my company," I said, pulling out my phone. "He lied about his qualifications, faked his resume, and used a false name to get the job." I showed them a picture of Jack's employment profile. I paused for effect and looked Jake in the eye. "Hi boss," he gulped out. A collective gasp swept through the room. My dad's face was thunderous. My mom was smirking. But I love him," Emily cried, tears streaming down her face. "He doesn't love you, honey," I said softly, putting a hand on her shoulder. "He loves your money." I then proceeded to show everyone the evidence I had gathered about Jake's gambling debts, his unpaid bills, and his fraudulent activities. The more I revealed, the more Jake's carefully constructed facade crumbled. Finally, I turned to my dad. "And you," I said, my voice filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. "You were so quick to judge me, to dismiss me, to tell me that I was an embarrassment. But who's the real embarrassment here, Dad? The daughter who built a successful business and tried to protect her family, or the man who was so blinded by his prejudice that he couldn't see the truth staring him in the face?" My dad opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He just stood there, speechless, his face a mask of shame and regret. The silence in the room was deafening. It was broken only by Emily's sobs and the occasional murmur of disbelief. I had said my piece. I had exposed Jake for who he was. I had finally stood up to my dad. I had done what I set out to do. The aftermath of the party was chaotic, to say the least. Jake was escorted off the property by security, his dreams of wealth and status shattered. My sister was heartbroken, devastated by the betrayal of the man she thought she loved. My dad retreated into his study, refusing to speak to anyone. My mom stayed by my side, offering comfort and support. She told me how proud she was of me, how strong I had been. She said that she had always known that Jake was no good, but she hadn't known how to prove it. Emily slowly began to process what had happened. She was angry, hurt, and confused. But she also started to see Jake for who he really was. It took time, but eventually she realized that I had saved her from a terrible mistake. As for my dad, it took him a long time to come to terms with what had happened. He was forced to confront his own prejudices, his own biases. He had to acknowledge the pain he had caused me over the years. 1 week later he called me, his voice contrite and apologetic. He admitted that he had been wrong, that he had treated me unfairly. He said that he was proud of my achievements, that he admired my strength and resilience. I didn't forgive him immediately. It would take time to heal the years of hurt and resentment. But I was willing to start the process. I was willing to give him a second chance. In the end, the party was a turning point for our family. It forced us to confront our demons, to address the issues that had been festering for years. It was painful, messy, and emotionally draining. But it was also necessary. The truth had come out, and while it hurt, after a while it actually started to heal. So, that's the story of how I got my revenge. It wasn't easy and it wasn't pretty. But it was necessary. I finally realized that I couldn't control other people's actions or opinions, but I could control how I reacted to them. I could choose to stand up for myself, to protect my family, and to live my life on my own terms. The biggest lesson I learned from all of this, I think, is that love is a gift. It is a beautiful gift that should be treasured, not taken for granted. It is a strong and powerful force that makes the world a better place. Oh, and I'm looking for a new manager for the Western branch of my company.